This is the 9th part in a series entitled The Rod of Correction, and believe you me, we will get to the actual use of the rod here before too long. But I've tried to give us all some background because like many other subjects in the Christian way of life, this is a subject that's filled with confusion. And one of the reasons is because everybody has an opinion on it. And I guess that's all right to a certain extent. However, God has revealed himself as to how we are to raise our kids. And we've looked at a lot of things up to this point. And as I said, there is both a balance between the positive and the negative. We are to give our children praise, and they're going to deserve praise, and we should not withhold it when it's due. On the other hand, it is an unbalanced life. It is an unbalanced approach to parenting if we do not include in that a punishment when it is necessary. Now, we saw that along the lines of the 4-generation curse, that somewhere along the line, a father is going to be responsible, and we are going to talk about that more. That actually, when you go back up the ladder of the hierarchy, it is the responsibility of the dad. The buck stops here. When you talk about raising the kids, it's mom helps out, elder brother can help out, but the bottom line is the buck stops here with the dad. And it is the dad who starts the 4-generation curse. Somewhere along the line, the dad commits to the son a falsehood, and he believes it and puts pressure on him to perpetuate it to the grandson and then the great-grandson. By the time you get to the end of it, though, you get people who are in deep trouble. Now, again, we call the trouble that they are in the hardness of the heart or the blackout of the soul. People who have a vacuum opening up in their soul, and they are just drawing in cosmic thinking. And not only that, you have in each case here, the father being the cosmic evangelist. Now, in the Garden of Eden, who was the cosmic evangelist? None other but Eve. She was lost, and she brought her false doctrine to Adam, and though he wasn't deceived, he still embraced it and believed it. So she was the cosmic evangelist. But in a family, the parents can actually be the evangelists of false teaching to their children. And that's what this type curse is all about. And it is really a devastating thing, incorporated in the very 10 Commandments themselves. So you need to keep that in mind. Now, that brings us once again to the spectrums of idolatry. It's one thing to talk about materialism, and we all talk about how people today are going after money and things, and how that's first priority and the like. But bringing it on to the other side, we're running after celebrityship. We have teen idols, we have movie idols, we have people who influence our thinking socially and culturally. I mean, that's what Hollywood is all about. And not only that, are they popular, they make money from us when they do that. But bringing it home, right in the home, is somebody who can become such a celebrity that they take the place of Jesus Christ. That's a child. And instead of the parents making the child do what's right and conform to a standard, the child begins calling the shots, and the parents bow down to the shrine they set up for themselves. But that is humanism, or if you worship that child in such a way, that child becomes a deity in your life. You cannot let that happen. One side is materialism, the other side is humanism, and it comes right down to the home with the child. Both are idolatrous situations. Okay, then we looked at the Institutes of Divine Establishment, actually. Institute 5 is the family. And I had Miss Margaret Buffkin ask me a question with regard to a wife and a husband. She said, so a wife only has to listen to her husband if he is saved. And I said, oh, no, Margaret. She said, well, you've changed your position. And I said, no, I have never changed my position. I have always said that if you are living under the roof, you've got to love, honor, and obey, except in these areas. If it's anything immoral. Now, there are some husbands who sell their wives out as prostitutes. Now, you tell me that woman can say, Buster, pack your bags, or I'll pack. No. She does not have to obey him in that area, in an area of immorality. Okay? If it is illegal, Bonnie and Clyde, we're going to get married and rob banks. No, she doesn't have to follow her husband into any type of law breaking. All right? Unethical. Little white lies to get me ahead in business. She can say, no, I will not do it. And she is right before God, and the husband is wrong. Or unspiritual. You're not going to be spiritual. You're not going to get saved. And she can tell that person nonsense. But in every other area, as long as she is under his roof, and please, I am not chauvinistic. You understand my position here with regard to placing Christian ladies on a pedestal, or any ladies on a pedestal with due respect. However, if she is under his roof, the home is his castle, and that's what God teaches. She is in every other bona fide area under his authority. Other than that, you break the picture, as it were. You break the chain of command. You have the tail wagging the head instead of the head wagging the tail. You have one who is in a position of subordination calling the shots. Now, I brought that up simply because that's what happens in a home with children. You have the child who is in a position of subordination beginning to call the shots to parents. They think they are the authority. That's built into the old sin nature. And the very first people that a child begins to resist and oppose and try to manipulate and change, you know that children will try to change you. Instead of you trying to change them, they'll do it. I've been there. I'm old enough to have seen, and so are you. They will turn the tables on you unless you're firm in your convictions. Hey, I'm the parent here, you're the child. You see, across the board, you always have a hierarchy. There's always somebody over you and above you that you are accountable to. And with that position comes authority. This is what we are going to do. This is what we're not going to do. Now, as I say that, I always have to put these disclaimers. That doesn't mean that the one in authority is such a dictator, so demanding that he cannot ask a subordinate for an opinion. What would you like to do today? Well, what color would you like as paint on the wall, or what have you? He doesn't have to demand everything to be his own way. And he must allow, within limits, the people beneath him in the chain of command to have responsibilities, to have opinions, to make suggestions and the like, and even to share together in the responsibility of parenting. Now, I say that as well because this morning, after I got done speaking, it was an interesting thing. I said to myself, is there an echo in here? Because I came here and I had Donna Whitinger come up to me and say, I've seen in my daycare exactly what you're talking about. I know exactly what you're saying with regard to the kids. And I walked in the back, and Tim Little said, I've seen in daycare the very same thing. I mean, the exact words from front to the back of the church. I've seen in daycare exactly what you're talking about. She said, there'll be kids who will come in there, and they'll begin socking other kids in the nose. I mean, kicking them, biting them, and so forth. And the daycare worker, sheer liability, will pick the kid up and say, you're going in what they call timeout. You're going to sit there and you're not going to hurt the other kids. And when the moms come and see that, Tim Little has had this experience. The mom will say, don't you treat my child like that. You're not going to treat my child mean like that. And yet he is annihilating the other kids. That is nonsense. That mother should have said, thank you, grabbed that son by the ear, marched him to the bathroom, and tanned his hide, and said, you're not going to hurt those kids again, and if you're in timeout, this is what you're going to get tomorrow if you do it. And we're going to do it again until you learn that you do not hurt other people in that fashion. Now, that's authority. And until such a time as that kid learns that, guess what he's going to do in daycare, in kindergarten, in high school, in college, in the taverns? He's going to try to clean everybody's plow because the universe centers around him. Because dad and mom didn't teach him the lesson that there's always somebody bigger and stronger over you. You're just a little tyke. All these years, you better learn the lesson. That's going to happen unless you toe the line. Now, spanking is not the answer to every discipline problem. But if they are biting, punching, gouging, kicking other people, I would dare say that a little pain on the backside is the answer. Do you like to do that to someone else? Would you like them to do that to you? Here's how it feels. Doesn't feel so good, does it? No, well, don't do it to them. Okay, we're all clear on this, and so forth. Now, because of that, we are in trouble. Our public schools, many of you could testify the very same thing. We are in trouble today. A kid will not do the homework, and you know whose fault it is? The teacher. And the parents will come and blame the teacher. You've given my child too much homework. It's the same homework assignment I've given down through the years. It's just too much for him. Why? He's got too much of a TV schedule or something. He's got to play the pinball machines or whatever. You should, as a parent, say, you're going to make an A on this or do the best that you can for that teacher, or you're not going to leave this house until your homework is done. Boy, do I sound old-fashioned. I guess I'm really dating myself with regard to this. That is old-fashioned, but you know something? It's the only thing that works. Nothing else is going to work. Letting the kids run wild, stay out late, not be prepared for school, bleary-eyed in the morning whenever they arrive for class is not the answer. Holding their feet to the fire on academic subjects and making them respect the authority of the teacher is the way the Bible says it should be. Okay. And if you don't, they need to face the consequences. Now that brings me to this point. We've been talking about punishing young people. And of course, one of the things is the importance of the faith. I wanted to bring something out that I didn't do this morning as well, with regard to a couple of things. With regard to the authority in other areas of divine establishment, it says, he bears not the sword in vain. Now, that is an interesting thing that the Bible was not written in the Wild West or in our day. He bears not the 38 in vain. He bears not the Uzi in vain. He bears not the guillotine in vain. He bears not the hangman's noose in vain. Why does he use the sword? Because there is no more, not another rather, weapon that has a personal factor attached to it. See, you can shoot somebody from a distance. I don't think that bothered me too much if he really deserved it. But if you had a Machaira, an 18-inch Roman sword, double-edged, sharp, they would come up and they would just simply open their shield this much, and they'd come under the a barbarian swept down from the north, and they had these 6-inch long, these 6-foot long broadswords, and they'd swing these things, and they'd laugh at those little Roman soldiers. You know, all they had was this little Machaira 18 inches long, and I've got a sword that is 6 feet long, and they'd stand up there and head and shoulders taller than those things, and the Romans would simply come up, open their shield like this, stab the Machaira right in the heart of this big Goliath barbarian guy. All he needed to do was push it in there about 2 to 3 inches. Sharp enough went in, stopped his heart, and that guy was dead. He'd pull his sword down and march to the next guy, open it up, and while the guy's busy wielding his sword up over his head, the guys were stabbing him in the heart, just like that. But the point, I'm getting off the point. But it did get quiet in here. Yeah, this is better TV, huh? Okay, the point is, there is a personal touch to the sword, unlike any of those others. He bears not the sword in vain. What does that mean? It means that he doesn't make it personal to himself, but there's a personal aspect between the criminal and himself as to who's going to win the battle for right. And that's why it's the sword. The man has to hold it in his hand. He has to plunge it in the heart. And there's a personal aspect. The same thing with the rod. The rod is something that is personal. Why? Because on the end of that rod is the hand of mom or dad or the guardian, and it becomes personal. I'm going to see to it that justice is going to be meted out, carried out with you. And no one else is going to do it but me. And I'm going to take the rod, just like you take the sword. There is a personal factor that enters into it with the sword and the rod, unlike the other ways of discipline or punishment. Hangman's noose, nothing personal there except the guy who pulls the lever and the floor drops out from under you and so forth. But when you have a sword and when you have a rod, it means that this hand is going to see to it that justice is meted out to you. And that places it in a whole new light. All right, so what we were talking about then, before I got carried away with a little Roman Empire history and soldiers. You know, they had Pax Romana for which means Roman peace, for 400 and some odd years, all because of that Machaira, and all because that's the way they learned to battle, and they were a fierce army. All right. In fact, Brian, it was the Romans that defeated Cleopatra, but she took her life in her own hands. We'll not mention how, but everybody downstairs will know how. There was a snake involved. The maturity factor, and that's where we left off this morning. There is a principle. To whom more or much is given, more is required. And I was trying to make the point where, as kids get older, built into the system should be those, I'm only going to say it once. You're old enough to understand. Do you read me loud and clear? Commands. But as they are smaller, understanding becomes a factor. Did they really comprehend? Do they fully understand? Therefore, I believe that you should allow what I call the 3-count system. Now, and one of the reasons I say it's the 3-count system is because it allows you to get control of yourself. You know, flesh 4, there's nobody that can provoke flesh 4 like a child sometimes, you know. They're really getting to you, and all of a sudden, boom, before you are beat red in the face and you are mad and you pick them up and you are just a whale in the daylight. No. You don't want to do it that way. You want to, first of all, restate the law. Ask them if they understand and tell them the consequences. Okay? If it happens again, you get a little louder, a little firmer, a little more stern. Okay, look, I've already told you once and you did it. Okay, this is what you did. Did you do it? Yes. Did you understand? Yes. Okay. If you do it again, there's something worse that's going to happen the third time. If they do it the third time, you remove them, and with the face. And this is when God says, I set my face against it. That's what the parent has to do. You set your face against the child. You are standing in God's stead. It's better for you, with all the love you have, to set your face against their sinfulness at this point than for God later in life to set his face against them and to judge him with true the wrath of God. So you say, I told you this was going to happen. You explain it to them. Did you understand? Yes. Now again, you know what that does? 3 times the child has witnessed against themselves. No laws against self-incrimination in God's system. Did you understand? Yes. Did you do it? Yes. Second time. Third time, in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. You don't have 2 or 3 witnesses. The child himself bears witness. Why do we do it that way? Simply because when we stand before God, every mouth may be stopped, or they make a confession of accountability, stopped, and the world becomes guilty before God. I did it. I'm to blame. I get what I deserve. So that is a recognition that I understood it, that I did it, and I get what I deserve. Then whatever punishment at that point must be meted out. Later on in life, it can be changed because of the principle. They have a better grasp of things. You've had several years to nurture them in this type of fashion, so that now you get them to the point where I'm only going to speak once, and it's built into the system. Okay, now, Numbers chapter 15. Verse number 24. This is why we say this. You simply cannot punish someone for true ignorance. Now, please don't misunderstand. I am not talking about the fact where we say ignorance of the law is no excuse. Obviously, if they're 22 years old and they're going 100 miles an hour down the road, and the policeman pulls them over and they say, I didn't know what the speed limit was, Well, ignorance is not an excuse. You should have known. You're old enough to have known. But there are cases where we do, as Israel did, even as adults, sin in ignorance. This is especially the case with younger kids as they're coming up. And that is why you give the 3-count system. The benefit of the doubt to the point of 3 times you understood and did it, it's time to take action. That's like us in the flood. I was quoted in the newspaper saying, we've been flooded 12 times the last 10 years. See, we should have done something about it a long time ago, but we didn't, is the point. That was ignorance on my part, long time ago. But it was a city official. Surely I should have trusted a city official. The head over the water department himself came out here and talked to Glenn and me and promised with such sincerity, oh, you don't have to move. You can go ahead and remodel. With the building of the pumping station, this area will be taken care of. There'll be no more floods. 8 floods later, we finally got our say. Okay. Then it shall be, verse 24, if aught be committed by ignorance, here it is, without the knowledge of the congregation, that all the congregation shall offer 1 bullock for a burnt offering. All right? Verse 25, the priest shall make an atonement for all the congregation, and it shall be forgiven them. You see, if you gave a command to a little one and they did not understand, you simply cannot spank. You've got to let it go until you begin the process of making sure without a shadow of a doubt that they understood. If it's in ignorance, you've got to forgive it. You can give a warning, but you cannot take further action, for it is ignorance. Verse 26, it shall be forgiven all the congregation of the children of Israel. Verse 27, if any soul sin through ignorance, then he shall bring a she-goat. And the priest shall make an atonement for the soul that sins ignorantly, when he sins by ignorance before the Lord. Okay? And last part of verse 28, it shall be forgiven him. There is such a thing that in our immaturity, in our limited human ways, something can escape our attention and we wander in areas of trespass that we wouldn't have normally done if we had only known. And so therefore, built into the system, God allows us to escape our own ignorance if we genuinely want to serve him. But now I want you to note, verse number 30. But the soul that does presumptuously, what does that mean? He knew it and he did it anyway. The soul that did presumptuously. Oh, he was in full cognizance of what he was doing. He knew the prohibition. He knew the consequences, but he thought he would not get caught, and did. Whether he's born in the land or a stranger, that soul shall be cut off from among his people, because he has despised the word of the Lord and has broken his commandment. That soul shall be utterly cut off, and his iniquity upon him. That's why I say, you wait before you punish to make sure that that soul, the young person understands. If they do, then you carry out the execution of your threatened pain or punitive measures. All right? Let's go back now. And I think what we'll do at this point is turn to Proverbs 22. Proverbs 22. Much of the Bible's philosophy that we adhere to with regard to child rearing comes from the book of Proverbs, chapter 22, verse 6. We call Proverbs wisdom literature. And for the life of me, I've never understood. I've been a Christian for a long time now, and I've been in a whole lot of churches. And you know what? Because of their emphasis on salvation all the time, I never fully understood until I became doctrinal in my approach that there was much more to the Christian way of life. One area of life that Christianity has yielded to the world, in other words, the influx of cosmic thinking, is in the area of child training. Now it says, verse number 6, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Let's take a look at this verse. Let's exegete it. Go back to the original language. It is the Hebrew verb kanak. It is in the cow imperative. Now, you understand that whenever I use these stems, prefixes, and suffixes, that changes the idea of the word. If it is in the cow stem, it means how this word is normally understood, generally translated when one Hebrew talks to another Hebrew. So they understood the idea of kanak. What does it mean? It means, number one, to dedicate something to a specific task. Turn with me to Deuteronomy chapter 20, holding your place. Deuteronomy chapter 20. And verse number 5. The officers shall speak and say to the people, what man is there that has a new building and hath not dedicated it? Speaking of soldiers going to battle. Let him go and return to his house. In other words, if they send him to the front lines now, he has just built a brand new house that hasn't been dedicated to the Lord, and it hasn't been dedicated to his family and the like, what is going to be first and foremost on his mind? Getting back there to that house. So before, to make sure that it is all legal, everything is recorded, the deed is recorded, and the house is theirs, before going to the front lines, they send him back and do what? Dedicate the house. Let him return to his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man dedicate it. Wouldn't that be something? Here I am. I built the house. I bankrupt myself to get this edifice up, put my family in it, and somebody else is going to dedicate the house. Somebody else is going to get their paws on it through inheritance tax or something. So he goes back and secures it for his family. All right? That's what Kanak meant to the Hebrew. That you had something that you were going to dedicate for a specific task. Now, with that came the idea of limiting its use for a certain thing. Now, in this case, it was limiting its use for the man's family. No one else could use it. It was set apart from all others for them. And so, we translate Kanak to literally throttle the options, to limit its use to certain things. And when you have a young person here, that's exactly what you're doing. When we talk about dedication, you're talking about limiting their freedom, limiting what they can do, restricting use of their person and property toward the goal of Christ-likeness. So when we're talking about training up a child, it is talking about slapping limitations on them, giving them a direction, and saying, this is what you're dedicated for. This is how you are going to use your life, at least as long as you're under my roof. Now, as I noted, that doesn't mean that you have to determine what their career is going to be. If they don't like mustard, force mustard on them, and so forth. That doesn't mean that. I don't like mustard. Okay, fine. Do you like ketchup? That's fine. Just a little personal thing there, because I didn't like mustard, and probably no matter how many times they would have spanked me, I still wouldn't have liked mustard. And as I've grown up, I don't like mustard now. So, however, those things are personal. But with regard to issues of life, honesty, morality, godliness, spirituality, and that sort of thing, you are limited in your options. No, you're not going to run around with those who push drugs. You're not going to do it. You're not going to do this, you're not going to do that. But here is what you can do. It's not all negative, it is the positive. Because you are directing them toward a goal. You're training them up. You're setting them straight. You are actually, as the Lord, whenever he knew he was near Jerusalem, he set his face like flint to the cross. That's what it means. To be determined to get to the goal by limiting his options in every other area. And that's what Kanak came to mean to the Hebrews. To limit the options, to throttle decisions and all other areas toward the establishment of a goal. All right? Let's go to the very next word or two words in this. Oh, one more thing. I almost missed this. It's in the imperative mood. What does that mean? It means God is giving us commands as parents. It is a command of God. It is not something that you can say as a parent, well, I'll take it or leave it. You can't do that. Because if you leave it, you're disobeying God. The imperative mood establishes the fact that you are now under a command of God to raise that child for Him. Not to do so is to fail Him, yourself, and the child with regard to His plan for their life. And yours too. All right? Next, a child. Now, why the King James people said a child, I don't know. Does he expect us just to go out on the street and say, hey, child, I'm going to take you in, all right? And I'm going to do this, that, and the other. You're going to live here. Oh, no, mommy and daddy live down there. Oh, no. Bible says just to pick a child, any child. And you're the first one in my sight. No, it's in the definite article in the Hebrew, and that means the child. And it makes all the difference in the world in our understanding of it. The particular child, in other words. Your own child is what it means. Turn to, holding your place here, turn to Psalms 127. The point is, you do not raise someone else's kids. Doesn't mean you cannot watch them. But it does mean that God says it is the specific child that he has given to you that you are responsible for raising. Verse number 3, Psalms 127. Children are an heritage from the Lord. Now, that means that when parents have children, when a married couple has children, that God is the one who gives them to them. How do we know that? We've studied that before. The parents give them human life and containers. As soon as they are removed from the womb, God makes a decision, and he gives that person soul life. At that point, they become humanly alive. Now, it doesn't mean that they are not human to a certain extent, but now they have a soul and they are humanly alive outside the womb. And the person that conceived the child, bore the child, that person now has an inheritance of God in the child. The fruit of the womb is his reward. And see, you thought that was just a commercial, the fruit of the loom, all right? But the fruit of the womb comes right here. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. Happy is the man that has his quiver full of them. The total complement of arrows in the Hebrew pouch strapped on his back was 12. Blessed is the man that has his quiver full of them, okay? So you're not really parenting until you have 12 children. Only then are you blessed of the Lord. No, just kidding. Okay. Perish the thought, please. All right. And I'm just teasing. Let's go now to Ephesians, holding your place. One more, and then we'll come back here and close out. Ephesians chapter 6. We just have a minute. Verse number 4. God himself is pointing toward the one who is ultimately responsible. Now, there are variations in this, of course, but the buck stops here with regard to how these young people are going to be addressed. Note who it's addressed to. And ye fathers. Now, he says honor father and mother. And a mother has absolute right to discipline the children just like the father. But sometimes as they grow up, they begin to get bigger and stronger. And the moms might have just, little puny arms, and they can no longer do the effect on the backside so what do they say? Okay? You can wait till the father gets home. Then you're going to get it. And the mom must remember, just write it down, put it there out of reach so they can't get it. This was the infraction. This is what was done. This was what was said. I did it and didn't have any effect. Now, when dad comes home from work, whether it's 5:30 or 6 o'clock, you're going to have to deal with him. Okay? And you fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. But note the phrase, your children. Point. We bring kids into the world, And we often give them to someone else to raise. Now, again, please don't misunderstand. That doesn't mean we cannot give them and someone else watch them or utilize daycare, any of that. I'm talking about basically, generally, we know what's going on and we take charge of our kids. They are your children and not someone else's. So, coming on back to Proverbs 22, verse 6. This literally means, with the addition of the definite article, it's a noun, masculine, singular. Train up the child, or train up the child God has given you, the one that belongs to you, the one who is retained by you. And we are unlike any of the other in the animal creation. They only stay sometimes a few months, perhaps maximum to a year, under the care of the parents. We have up to nearly 1/3 of our lives under the roof of our parents. And of course, sometimes it gets to be even more than that, but that's not because they're invited. It's just because they're flesh and blood and Bob doesn't want to boot them out. Okay, train up your child, the one that belongs to you, and included in this is a retention, the one who is retained by you. And that's the whole point of the illustration here, given directly from the Hebrew language. It's under the child is under your roof, your auspices. It's your authority, your supervision. You have the right to call the last shots if that child is going to do something different from the standards that you have set up, following God and righteousness in your home. Therefore, as we close, you have a right to train up that child. That is, to set limits, to throttle their options, and to direct them toward a goal, and make expectations of their life that consistently, constantly, you are pointing them toward the direction of living their life pleasing to the Lord, which is the goal of all true Christian parenting.